No, that's okay.
We are live.
Well, we are
Ron
live.
on?
We got Ron coming on in too.
Right now.
All right, good. Welcome to the green room.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the green room.
I know, that's right. Well, first off, condolences on the loss of your brother, of course.
That was
No, listen, as life goes. Yep.
So,
here
yeah.
it comes. Yeah, no,
It was
on your
sad.
loss, and you
But
know,
it was a
you
nice
went to see your
service.
boss,
It
and
was-
now we have Ron Watson joining us.
Good
Listen, a
morning, good
return
morning.
visitor to the green room, of
Yeah.
course, and you know, I always let Ron do his own introduction because he likes to introduce himself in his lobbyist, terms and hat. And you know, Ron, I want to offer you, of course, memories of your son as well, who I know just had a date. You know, Ruta went to Boston on the loss of her brother, and you know, as life goes, I know that was a significant. Obviously, aspect of you coming into cannabis, and of course, the most significant aspect of every parent's life. So, my thoughts out to you, of course. Anyway, but welcome. Great to have you in the green room. Yeah,
good morning to everyone.
Yeah. Well, listen, Ron Watson of Watson Strategies, the lobbyist for cannabis in Florida, and listen, and a great mentor to me. Really since coming into the space. And, Ron, this is the first year I didn't come up to Tallahassee in the last 7 years, actually. And we'll talk about that. I didn't really think that there was a battle necessarily that I was going to use my powder, let's put it that way. So I want to keep my powder dry for future battles, which of course, we'll discuss as we go. So just as a means of letting everybody know, Ron, how long have you been up in Tallahassee doing what you do? And give us your definition of lobbyist, please, because I know you.
Well, thank you. As you well know, if anybody ever asks what I do for a living, I look them straight in the eye and I say I'm a scumbag lobbyist, and I hope to get a laugh out of that, because if I don't say it, that's what a lot of people think about what I do. Then I have the pleasure of being able to tell them, yeah, but I'm a weed lobbyist, so I have a lot of fun with what I do. Right?
You're like, oh, okay.
So, yeah. Oh, well, then
so
you're one of the good guys,
Oh,
then,
you're
right?
a good
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then, yeah.
But I think it's one of the huge things to say, Ron, is the difference now between what was 7 years ago, and if you think about the Bertha Madras and Alex Berenson years, and now we have the Senator Corey Simon and Senator Osgood years, right?
Yep. Well,
the discussion is different, and the players continue to be different, which is a unique thing about Tallahassee. So just kind of give us a flavor of what was going on there, this year, just in general, the governor's strength. It's different about Tally because of the term limits up there, and that, Ruta. There literally are kind of new lead players, which is good.
It's healthy.
So of course, Renner is the speaker, and Pasadomo, and Burton and Gregory led.
But Tommy Gregory is leading the charge. It looks like on the cannabis side.
Yeah, give us the flavor of what was going on up there this year, just in general.
Well, when I started working on this issue about 10 years ago, it was obviously very controversial. But let's just say I was better in the Senate and not as good in the House back in the days when we started all this. But you mentioned it, term limits, right? So the way that it works here in Tallahassee, at least, is you can't serve more than 8 years, or at least in the Senate, 10 years in any particular seat. And then you have to go away. So what happens obviously a lot is a lot of the House members, they run out their 8-year course, or sometimes they leave a little early. They look for an open Senate seat, and then they move across the hall. And so frankly, a lot of the people that were, I'll say, antis, or people that don't like the plant or have issues with the plant, that used to be in the House are, frankly, like you said, sir, now over in the Senate. And we actually have some new House members for the last couple of election cycles that, let's just say, have a much better understanding of the plant, and might even be a patient or two on the floor. And so that really does bring a different perspective to the table. But is that across the board, as you well mentioned? Absolutely not. So I tell everybody, we've come a long way. We have a long way to go. And so it's interesting, Doc. I did miss you this year, but you're right. Sometimes you need to, save your powder for when you have a really big fight. And as I tell all of my clients, if nothing bad happens to you, it's a good session, right? One of my lines always says is no man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature's in session. So depending upon your perspective, this last session, we just became safe, a Friday and a half ago. So they've gone home. The strange thing about it now is that we have 8 months between one session. And then we have 12 months between the next session.
Next session.
So we're now in the 12-month kind of window. So in theory, you know, they all go home and now they're running for re-election, the ones that are allowed to. Excuse me. And so we'll have an election in November. And as I saw, we may or may not have an adult use, a constitutional amendment, also a part of that election. So then how does that play out?
Well, hang on. Hit the record button, Tiffany. No, I'm kidding. It's always recording. So what's your prediction, Ron? Because usually the Supreme Court rulings come out on Thursdays per Gary Stein. I want to give Gary a shout out.
Which
You know,
would be this
no,
week.
listen, we like to think that we're a source of good, intelligent cannabis talk every Thursday, you know, and this is a great week for that because we need it because the Supreme Court may yet today, announce whether that adult initiative is going to be on the ballot or not. They have until February 1st, everybody.
April.
No,
I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. April 1st, everybody to announce April Fool's Day, which is interesting. I know.
Does anybody else see the irony in that too?
I know,
I've always
I
thought that. Yeah, it's like I was like April 1st. Really? That's the deadline?
Really?
Okay, great.
Of course. And if they don't announce, Ron, this is correct, right? Then it goes on the ballot. That would be fair to say.
I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on, I guess, a webcast now. So yes, it's my understanding. It's been explained to me by very smart lawyers that that's how I understand it. If it's kind of like, you know, the governor can sign a bill, he can veto a bill, or he can let it become law without his signature. I guess this would be the court allowing it to become on the ballot without them saying yes or no. So I guess that is an option. I've not really paid that close attention to the Supreme Court except for a few of these big issues. But I'm not so sure that in my memory, I can remember them just defaulting and saying by default it goes on the ballot.
Yeah,
so I do believe they'll make a ruling. I have a bet going on with a few friends of mine. A couple of them believe that they will just by default allow it to go on. And I said, I really don't think this court will do that. So I told everybody, I actually went to oral arguments. Gosh, what was it? Back in November now. I went there and my joke was I dressed in black because I thought I was going to a funeral. I went there thinking that it was going to be 2-5. And then after the questioning, I actually left thinking, my gosh, this could maybe be 5-2. Now, all my lawyer friends say, Ron, don't, you know, you can't assume anything based on their line of questioning. I'm like, I understand that. But at the same time, I was there. And it seemed to put the AG on the defensive pretty quickly. And I don't think they really ever recovered. So with all of that said, you can never really predict what a court will do. But I think I wore the wrong clothes because I was going to a funeral and I'm not so sure that occurred. So we will see. Yes, sir. By about 11 a.m. this morning is when the court normally releases. They don't have to, but that's historically when they release. So yes, every Thursday I've been checking to see if the court's going to rule one way or another. But you're right. I guess we only have this Thursday and one more before the default option, I guess, would kick in. So probably this week, if not, maybe next week, I suppose.
So the governor himself said that, you know, he believes that the Supreme Court will allow it to be on the ballot. And I think, you know, just following his lead as most things. Did you note a less powerful governor in Tallahassee this year, Ron? Was it a palpable feeling to that extent that his issues and things of that nature?
That's a great question, but I think it's all relative. This is by far, I've been doing this for 34 years, so I've had several governors in my past. In my opinion, this has been the strongest governor that I've ever seen legislatively, where he had a very strong agenda, and let's just say that they kind of agreed with almost everything he wanted. There was a little less of that this year. I think with some of the presidential aspirations, you know, dimmed, that certainly had a little effect. But so I think the difference was he didn't come to the legislature this year and say, here's my agenda, go pass it. He was obviously doing other things. So when the election didn't go his way, he came back. He was still influential. He certainly got involved in some fights, and he certainly said yes. You know, he vetoed the speaker's priority bill on the social media issue, but they kind of had a deal that they were going to fix it where it had a little bit more parental rights in it. So there was some pushback. But he's still a strong governor, and so you can't deny, excuse me, that compared to some of the ones in the past as well. So,
and the reason I bring it up is that it's well known that he does not want legal adult use under his watch. He's said that, right, and he's come out recently with some comments that are, relatively anti-cannabis. He doesn't like the
Doesn't
smell,
like the smell.
seriously, and they want to regulate it in public places and doesn't want the hotel
Yeah,
hallways in
it's-
Orlando smelling of,
Mhm.
of cannabis. And so those are all interesting issues, Ron, but I want to talk about what was talked about, of course, in Tallahassee this year when it comes to cannabis. Two things, really. One was the hemp bill signed by the House and the Senate, waiting to see what's going on, or passed by the House and the Senate, waiting to see what's going on with the governor's signature with that.
Hey, let me do some inside ball there. That has not actually been officially been presented to the governor. So I know a lot of the articles that have been actually written said that the bill has gone to the governor. Technically,
Okay.
the next step in the process is the bill will go to the governor, and this is interesting. So there's no 15-day clock starting. The Constitution is very clear. When a bill is, quote, presented to the governor, he has 15 days after session, or he only has 7 days if they do it during session. It's very clear in the Constitution. What's not very clear and what officially has to occur for a bill to be presented to the governor is the speaker has to sign, like literally sign a hard copy. The president has to sign the hard copy of the actual printed bill, and then they actually literally present it. So whenever you see a governor's bill signing ceremony, there's literally a bill on the desk that he has to sign. That bill that he's signing has already been signed by the speaker and the president, right? And so he can't receive the bill until they actually sign it and then present it to him. It's only when they present it to him that the 15-day clock starts. So they have not presented it to him. So sometimes, there's all kind of things. Why do they hold on to a bill? Sometimes the governor may want to have a bill signing ceremony and everybody, it gets around and we say, look what we did, kind of thing. Sometimes what you'll do is you'll hold a bill if you think the governor may veto it, because then it gives you more time to convince him that he shouldn't do that. So there's no rhyme or reason as to exactly when the governor has to be presented a bill. So we're at the stage where the hemp bill has passed the legislature, but they have not officially presented it to him. So
No, I mean, that's interesting. And, very few people watch the Florida channel every hearing. But
Wait,
we
what?
do. No, Ron, I'm the one that is, this. I text you when you've got the perfect placement, okay, behind the camera. And I know don't try to do that some days.
I appreciate hey, you're picking your nose, stop it. I mean, I always appreciate those kind of texts. So yeah, thanks for that, Doc.
But it was a very fascinating debate this year because, I want to tie them both together because as we face what I, call the light at the, the train tunnel coming at us, legal adult use, and listen, that light at the end of that tunnel is terrifying to the Tommy Gregory's of the world and others. And we saw that.
He's a local yoga.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Representative Tommy Gregory, who, let me ask you this, Ron, before we get too far into it. Anyway, the debate was about not only what was going on in the hemp shops, CBD purveyors. I call them cannabinoid purveyors, Ron. Some good, some bad, and all cannabinoids. And I have two big questions for you. One is Representative Mazzullo, who's been kind of carrying the ball in the cannabis space over the past couple of years.
Did an outstanding job.
He did, and I want to give him a lot of credit for always speaking of the protection of medical.
He did a great job.
And I was surprised when he came up with the 10% THC cap. I called that the swishing of the legislative tails up there, letting everybody know that no matter what you vote on and what you pass, we're going to put our will on it. And I was fascinated, Ron, that we didn't hear any talk of tax rate that they were talking about that they were going to charge, nor quantity or how they were going to track quantity purchase. But here's my question for you. Mazzullo's termed out. Is Representative Gregory going to now carry this ball forward as the House's, voice? As you know, they always have a voice of cannabis. Representative Rodriguez, Ray Rod, of course, was the earliest of them. Representative Mazzullo, I think, has done an outstanding job. He's engaged with us physicians and learned. I was surprised at that 10% flower cap early number, Ron, because Mazzullo knows flower is not their concern. Their concern are the edibles.
Yeah.
Right. And the concentrates. But let me ask you this. who do you think is going to carry the ball forward? Do you think it is going to be Representative Gregory, or is there somebody else? Is Roach going to come back into play? Is there somebody new that can be cultivated? They need to be cultivated on the Republican side of the aisle, of course. We know that.
I guess I'll say yet to be determined. It's interesting. It's a great observation on your part. But as you well know, we have an election coming up, so we'll have some new members. You're going to have a new speaker. You're going to have new leaders that come underneath that speaker, and everybody wants to be a probe chair. And so, you kind of like you have a leadership team, right? And so then what ends up happening, frankly, is sometimes when the leader wants something to happen, they kind of choose who is lucky enough to be the person who carries that message for them. I don't know that that's been determined yet. I mean, yes. Is there?
Who's the
I mean,
next speaker?
it's Diaz from South Florida. Yeah, Perez, Danny Perez. Excuse me, I just drew a blank there. Danny Perez from South Florida. So he's going to be he's the on deck speaker, and we have Ben Albritton, who is the on deck Senate president. And so
Are they known to be more or less pro cannabis necessarily, because they're not really names that I'm familiar with in our space.
I think that I will say that the trend will probably continue of us being better in the House than in the Senate. I guess I have a feeling that that may be what happens. I'm not exactly sure though. Although I will remind you, the idea for the THC cap did come from the House side. So, but we will have new leadership, and I'm not so sure if that will be something leadership pushes. It may not. And if it is something they push, then they will kind of choose who they think their best messenger is. Could it, if it's an anti-message, yeah, I would imagine that could be Gregory. But if it's a more positive message, I have certainly several other legislators who'd be able to carry that water too. And so what you try to do is you try to encourage from the bottom up the right thing to happen. And again, that's why I think we're better off. When you're a patient, or when you actually see this medicine helping someone you love, it changes your perspective. And if it doesn't, then you got a problem.
So that to me is that so very interesting difference, Ron, between now and 7 years ago, 5 years ago, is the discussion now is different, right? And I really thought that one of the most striking things about the discussion in this year's session what was coming out of the cannabinoid purveyor world, okay? And Senator Burton literally calling them out for practicing "quote unquote" medicine, in a venue that they're really not allowed to, just by FDA, because it's a food product. And there's let's face it, there were things going on in that space that, and Gregory said it himself more than once, that they felt duped and deceived, by the hemp space, quite frankly. And I think what came out in the hemp bill in Florida, and this is the second big question I want to ask you, because as I interpreted what's now available, because it looks like anything that's converted, synthetic is synthetic, converted is converted. But it looks like they also included the converted Delta 8, right? Converted from CBD, 10, 6, right? O and HHC have always been synthetic and banned in Florida, but now including the conversions, to me that includes converted from CBD Delta 9 also, Ron, right? So
I believe so. That's
right.
Yes, keep going.
So theoretically, 5 milligrams now of Delta 9 is allowed in the gray market, in the CBD purveyor world, in the hemp shop, the CBD store, right? 5 milligrams per piece and 50 milligrams per package, or do they go to 100, whatever the number may be? But doesn't that Delta 9 need to be derived from a hemp plant with less than 0.3% THC, right?
You were so smart, Doc. Because let me ask you this, because I was an interested bystander. We did not work the hemp bill at all, but yes, am I an interested bystander? Of course I am.
That's why I wasn't in Tallahassee this year.
I was following along, right? And so I read it the same way. If you're banning these other substances, which I think it does, what my question was, what's left to put in the 5 milligrams up to 50 milligrams? I said, is that all Delta 9 THC, or is it just CBD? Because I think you're right, Doc. Not a lawyer, didn't go to law school, not interpreting this. But the way that I read it too, it seems like if you're banning all the things that are in it now, what's going to be left to be able to put in? And I think the answer is straight up Delta 9. But you're right. If you then can't convert that through the CBD process, how are you going to make 5 milligrams from a 0.3 THC plant?
The biomass, right, the biomass doesn't add up. And you and I know that because we know the subtleties of that world. But we also know that you can purchase very cheap Delta 9 oil coming out of Oklahoma, Oregon, anywhere, and it's going to be awfully tough to legislate. And it's a mess. And, to me, and I want to lead into this, Ron, because what I worry about is as we go towards legal adult use, whatever that looks like, okay, as the sausage maker comes out on the other side. And Ruta and I have talked about this, and I'm interested in your perspective on it. To me, once it goes legal adult use, no matter what cannabinoid it is, as they walk into an MMTC that may have medical over here and legal adult use over here, if you don't have a card and you're elderly and you're coming in with sleep or pain or anxiety, or you're young, whatever you are, if you're doobie one, never done, what's going to go on the legal adult use side when you ask about a medical condition, when once again, to me, you're in the food product side. So to me, there's subtleties here, and I worry about those people walking out with a product that may end them up in the ER. Listen, I tell everybody, Ron, you know why I never saw a cannabis-related problem in the ER in my 35 years? Because no 5-year-old's ever going to smoke a joint. But they'll find their parents' gummies now laying on the table. If their parents are irresponsible, they may end up in the ER with, listen, what I call an overexposure, Ron. I refuse to go overdose, but I will say overexposure. Senator Simon or any other, doobie one, can now walk into a hemp store and get a 50 milligram Delta 8. No, I got it. But the point is, people end up in the ER now from products that weren't available when I was an ER doc. And you have to understand that, or you don't have the legitimacy, right, of the discussion. That's why I look forward to next year coming up to Tallahassee and having this discussion, because Ruta knows what we're interested in is safety and public safety and public education.
I think protecting medical is very important, and that's why I very much appreciated Dr. Masulo, because when we first sat down to talk about his THC cap bill, the first thing he said to me was, Ron, I want to protect the medical program. We need to make sure.
We heard that.
That was literally the beginning of the conversation that we had. But he's very smart, and he picks up things very quickly. And I said to him at one point, I said, but so how do you have an over-the-counter drug as well as a Schedule 3 if we move to scheduling? And he answered it in a way that surprised me, and it kind of made me rethink the situation. He said, well, Ron, he goes, right now you can buy a 200 milligram of Tylenol over the counter. He goes, but if you want an 800 milligram, you have to have a doctor's prescription to be able to get it. He goes, yes, of course you can take 4 pills of over the counter. He goes, but that's not the point. He goes, the point is to get that stronger strength, you need to have physician involvement. And so the whole argument for having a weaker strength in the recreational or adult use side is kind of his Tylenol argument of, well, if you're going to do it yourself, I can, yes, you can take 4, but so it was an interesting argument for him to kind of, as I'm pushing back on trying to obviously protect the medical, but at the same time, not, have them cap adult use before it's even an issue. But that was his pushback to me. And he said, Ron, that's the way I look at this. He goes, it should be allowed, yes, over the counter, but for the stronger strengths, more, prevalent situations, that should be controlled by physician involvement.
No, listen, we need a cannabis czar. We've always needed a cannabis czar in Florida. Dr. Mazzullo would be a great cannabis czar, to that extent, because listen, it would be the one thing that I would have come to Tallahassee for this year, Ron, and I don't think Ruta minds talking about it. We have a bill that Representative Buchanan, we hope is going to present next year. And we want MMTC training, for formal training for everybody that works behind the window of every MMTC in the state of Florida now, even while it's medical, much less as we go towards legal adult use. You know, we need to make sure that we don't have those never done, okay, citizens, not patients now, walking out of a dispensary with the wrong product. I don't want them driving on my roads, right? So there's a level of education and public safety.
It's gonna become also just a liability. Like you have spring breakers, you're gonna have spring breaker state. I mean, you're gonna have a lot of liability.
So I want to leave you with this. I want to leave you with this, Ron. I know we got a couple minutes. So here's my thoughts as we go forward towards this new cannabis world over the next 2 to 3 years. And I call it my hashtag Get Your Card Florida campaign. Okay. My belief is this: any cannabis consumer in the state of Florida right now, okay, if you're going to vote for legal adult use, then you should get your card. Legally, you should have your card. You should have the safety of having products that are not contaminated with mold, with fungi, with, God forbid, fentanyl, whatever it may be. Okay. The hemp space, the gray space, is going to be kind of closed down in October 1st. If the governor signs the bill, we'll see. So that's going to change the marketplace to a certain extent. Nobody wants anybody going back to the legacy market. So to me, to have your card as we go forward towards whatever legal adult use looks like 3 years down the line, I tell everybody, listen, you could always give up your card, you know, as legal adult use comes, because then there will be safe products available. And listen, Ron, I'd love your opinion on this, and it's an entire another green room. Do you think that the state's going to tighten up medical after legal adult use comes into play? Hopefully grandfather in everybody that's in the program already. But I think that they're going to want to route people into the tax side of the building, because that's where the state's tax revenue is going to come from, right? So to me,
I think everything's in play. I think everything would be in play.
Everything's in play.
All right, here's an example. One of my best friends from high school lives in Jersey. He had his medical card. When they went adult use up there, I asked him, "Are you keeping your card?" He said, "Absolutely." I said, "Why? Taxes?" And he said, "No, it's only like a 6 or 7% difference, which may not be enough to keep your card or lose your card." I said, "Why are you keeping your card?" He goes, "2 reasons. In Jersey, they have what they call front of the line. It's like a fast pass at Disney where you get to skip in front of everybody. So if there's 100 people in line for adult use and he's the only medical patient, he literally goes to the front of the line." The other big issue to him was they only allow delivery for medical patients.
Sure.
And so he wanted that option as well. So for those 2 reasons alone, so with that example, do I believe that the Florida legislature will put up even more hurdles than that? They have a difference between medical and adult use? Yes. So I don't know exactly the reason a lot of people will choose to keep their medical card over not having a card, but I bet you it's going to be in the legislative bill that they pass, if there's a legislative bill that they need to implement this.
I got it. My point is we've been stuck at 850,000 patients for over the last year. There's a reason for that, right?
Yeah,
so my point is there's not going to be a rush of new patients into medical unless, quite frankly, people understand that they may be closed out of the better side of the dispensary 3 years from now, you know, if they don't take the responsible, and we will wrap, the responsible action, quite frankly, of getting your card. Get educated, get safe, find a doctor, okay, in the appropriate clinic, right? That's going to do that.
There has to be a price differential, because you're talking expense for seeing a doctor versus not having to see one. So they're going to have to.
Let me ask you this. Had the 10% cap passed for adult use, what do you think that would have done for medical?
Oh, that would have been a significant positive for medical, but a disaster in every other way. I was surely not in favor of that, you know.
No, but you see my point. But my point is that the legislature is going to come up with as many hurdles as they can possibly think of. You're right. They don't want this. They don't like this. Back to your original point, I joked about it with a friend last night. If the governor has such a problem with smelling it outdoors, I have a solution for that. It's called adult lounges, right? They just did it out in Vegas. So if you don't want the smell on the street, and if you don't own your own property, where are you allowed to legally consume? You're not. I have a solution for that.
Right. Well, those are the things that have to be worked on. But listen, Ron, we need you back.
We do.
We've had you before. You're one of our favorite guests, and you know I've been chasing you for 3 weeks, not a couple months, all through session, of course. But now that session's over, let's watch today, see what the Supreme Court does, and we'll be back next week in the green room. Ron,
all right, love you guys. Anytime. Be well.
See ya.
See you guys next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks.
Bye, guys. Anytime.